Hobson. I'm the Marketing Manager at ITI. Welcome to the Showcase webinar series. Today's webinar is titled Riggers and Signal Persons, 1926.1400. I'm going to go over a couple of housekeeping items before we get started, so please bear with me if you've heard some of this information before. So these first few slides are going to be a bit of an introduction to ITI. ITI is a training company. Training, education, consulting, that's what we do. We have training courses at both client locations at our 3 training centers in North America. And these locations allow our students to learn in both a classroom setting and apply what they've learned in a hands-on practical setting as well. Our ITI's expertise in cranes and rigging really applies to a number of industries, many that are on the screen right now. And looking at the registration count, we actually have a lot of these industries on the line today, so a good cross-section. We're really proud to work with some of the greatest organizations in the world. There's an old saying, you can learn a lot about someone by the company they keep, and we really believe that all of these great companies trusting us with their crane and rigging operations says a lot about our standing in the industry. So the Showcase webinar series, it's a monthly free educational webinar with ITI President and CEO Mike Parnell. On the screen right here, you can see some of the previous editions, as well as today's presentation on riggers and signal persons. So our host, Mike Parnell, a lot of you on the line are familiar with Mike and his work within the industry. He's a technical director here at ITI, responsible for developing all of our current course curriculum. He's also the vice chair of the ASME B30 main committee, which sets the standards in the United States for cranes and rigging, as well as the chair of the ASME P30 committee, which sets the standards for lift planning. So without further ado, Mike, take it away.
Well, thanks, Jonah, very much. I look forward to a great time with all the participants, and thanks to everybody for taking a break from your holiday season here and sitting in with ITI. The subject that we are covering today has to do with riggers and signal persons, obviously. You know, we were working around the industry well before the CDAC committee got together, and we really were hoping for a stronger position on the CDAC activity in the development stage for riggers. We know that signal persons were able to make some headway, but we really didn't get all that big a shakeout for the description for the riggers' tasks, qualification, expectations, and things like that. And part of what we're going to talk about briefly today is some of those elements that we are finding now that 1400 has been released, and what the market is actually doing with those. So before we get too far downstream, I'd sure like to welcome, we have a host of folks that have joined us today, United Arab Emirates, Al Faris Group, and Chicago Bridge and Iron. We have a lot of participants from the Corps of Engineers here with us today. And Fluor is online with us, Kiewit and Mammut. We have a whole host of colleges and technical schools, Michigan Tech and some others. We really appreciate their participating. And Navy Crane Center, we certainly welcome them, and a lot of the cohorts there working at the Navy facilities around the country and around the world. These are all always near and dear to the military hearts for what rigor activities and expectations are, and certainly signaling. And we also would like to welcome Sims Crane and Sling Choker and a number of the Transocean folks. Glad to see them online with us, and Vestas for wind energy and wind turbines. And Weatherford, glad to see you guys here, in West Star Energy. So thanks for taking time out of your life. And this is a bit of a different format that you're going to see today in your layout. And we're looking forward for questions from you at the end. And won't be nearly as long as the old long-winded mic has been in the past. But we'll hit the points necessary and certainly look forward to your questions. So without further ado, let's go into what equipment, just talking about 3 slides here, what equipment is in this 1400 document and what would be included as relates to riggers and signal persons. And so you'll notice that these are right up in the scope of the 1400, identifies the different types of cranes, pedestal, overhead gantry that may be used for construction purposes, side boom, and barge-mounted cranes and so on, other equipment as applicable, pile driving, monorail, and other multi-purpose equipment. There is an exclusions list that by specific type, some power shovels, excavators, and backhoes, and then there's a limited exclusion for application for digger derricks and knuckle booms. So we want to, if you have that type of equipment, you want to look in there and see what is maybe partially applicable and partially limited, and I'll try to relay that as we get further into the presentation. Let's go into riggers first here, and what we've noticed over time in the last couple of years with the advent of this document is how folks are kind of breaking out for their what we've seen from training and qualifications, some a bit on the certification side. But we've noticed general industry, those that we would term to be basic riggers, and I'm going to, if you want to just make some notes, we're kind of calling a basic rigger is a qualification or in some cases by some organizations, a certification. These generally are folks that do not typically have to do calculation. So those would be load weight estimation, sling tension, chain fall, anticipated tensions, skidding, jacking and rolling, forces, all kinds of things that might have to do with estimating loads and or tensions. These folks are into primarily rigging inspection, sling identification, sling capacity identification, understanding hitches and applications, and how to sort of take directives or instructions from an advanced rigger. So in general industry, you'll notice that they're a bit different than what our perception, and this is by basically ITI, our view of the marketplace. But the advanced riggers populate a larger portion there, particularly power plants, powerhouses, refineries, heavy manufacturing, where folks have we have a larger pool of folks that are into the estimated weights, sling tension, and the calculation process. And then the 5% seems to hold fairly true for lift director, folks that need to be able to have a strong leg for LHEs, cranes and rigging, cranes and load handling equipment, and the rigging side, and also in lift directors having a good base in procedure writing, understanding sequence of events, and being able to have a handle on the safety aspects of the job overall and also the leadership. Over in construction, it's a bit different. And you'll notice that, again, ITI opinion, and I'll try to qualify that as we go through some of these slides, which some of our observations versus, and then when we hit on some of the rules, regulations, what those are emphatically. So we see a larger pool of basic riggers in construction, somewhat more transient workforce, and they may have some rudimentary or some basic introduction to rigging for their qualification level in their, if it's a union or non-union, in their apprenticeship program, a smaller slice of folks that would be termed advanced riggers, and then we still have or see that 5% for lift director. So that's kind of our breakdown, our understanding, just sort of giving you, pulling the curtain back a little bit and letting you see what our view is of how these folks break out in the industry. One thing that I really have wanted to impress on folks over time in the last 3 years, particularly since the advent of the 1400 document, is for folks to actually measure what's your risk and what are you doing in your organization operation, how many lifts are you making, what is that, or load handling events, where does that put us for a risk level. This is one little summary of an analysis that we did for a shipyard. It had a multiple location shipyard. They averaged at they had 14 yards, some very small and some average size, but averaged 112 lifts a day at 1.5 shifts, 168 lifts per day, and then times 250 days a year for 42,000, and times 14 yards. So that's about almost 600,000 lifts per year, and they got a real serious appreciation very quickly of the risk and exposure, which led them to deciding what are we doing with our workforce and qualification of those folks. Do we have enough advanced riggers? Do we have enough lift directors? How are we managing our cranes and our rigging activities? We also asked them to then complete a quick survey on critical lifts. And so in that critical lift category, you can see we're down here at 98 critical lifts per month times 14, and so we're at about 11 or 1,200 critical lifts per year. And that started to get their attention really quickly in deciding, geez, we really need to have some skookum folks that are dialed up for the advanced rigger and the lift director capacity, rigging engineering assistance, etc. So risk measurement, evaluation, all goes to helping decide to what levels do we need to qualify our folks. Part of the, as we take in new folks and or existing folks, I think something that, and this is an advisement by ITI, is to how do we target, we need to evaluate our workplace, how many lifts are we making and what kind are they, production lifts, repetitive lifts, standard lifts, general purpose rigging activities and load handling, or specialized. So target the skill levels that you need, and then identify the employees for those levels, and that may be there may be 150 folks that rig as a part of their craft or part of their activity, and then document. What you want to do really is document their experience. We're doing this right now. I've done this before on a number of occasions for power plant, and we said we created what we've called kind of a brag sheet. But take a look at the brag sheet, and in its form, it's current craft or trade, years in the trade and role, training history, load handling activity history, equipment operating, lift planning, and lift coordinating. And what we want to do is track down an accumulated hours that this is just a one-time interview and may take 20 minutes or so, that we can then track and put that into the personnel file, but also it gives us a great overview of the accumulated hours in a person's history for training, for basic rigging, accumulated hours, or load handling activities, rigging inspection, rigging loads with overhead cranes. Maybe guy has 3,000 or 4,000 hours accumulated there. Mobile cranes could have 16,000 or 20,000 hours. Small jib. So what you're doing is you're tallying and accumulating the hours that a person has performing some of these functions. That helps give us an idea of their experience, because experience is part of the definition for qualified person. On the back side is a small essay section, and my strongest load handling skills involve these. And then concerning load handling, I feel most knowledgeable about that. And based on my current skills, knowledge, and experience, I feel my weakest load handling activities are these things. So it gives us an idea, too, where are the learning gaps, where are the strengths, where are some what we might call weaknesses or learning gaps that we need to fill in. What we do then can do, and we often do for clients, is we test the knowledge of folks that by written or practical. We find out if the guy's got 20 years experience in a variety of these areas, really because of previous training, which you want to give credit for whenever you can, and that's part of what this does. You want to give the guy opportunity to quiz out of some of that area, and then identify where do we need to train, because you want to focus and dial down your training events to what's really necessary. And it's one of those things, geez, do we have to go back through another 8 hours of this or 8 hours of that just because, and are you not giving me any credit for my past work effort? So by accumulating the hours, testing and quizzing out of some areas, what we may find and do often, we'll find a certain group, maybe 20 to 30% of the folks, they do have the experience, but maybe very little recall or very little ability to quiz out or prove out knowledge in certain areas. And so they've got the time on the job but they may not have been in the decision-making role, or they may not really have had much of a formal training base to provide that. They kind of know what to do, but they're not really dialed in to maybe defend those decisions. And at any time, as certainly an advanced rigger, you want to know that he can defend the decisions being made and stand by the best practices that have been established and by the corporation or the company and the rules and regulations as applicable to his environment. So once we identify what's he got, where are the gaps, then we train to fill those gaps in, and we test and verify that that is seated or the comprehension is there. So creating a brag sheet, this is a one-time shot. It's a great exercise, and it helps understand where people have come from and what they're adding to your pool and adding to your workforce. What we want to do as an employer is provide or ensure that we have competent folks working for us. And whether it's rigger, signal person, laborers, could be tagline folks, could be certainly operators and others. But who can help ensure that competency? And it can come from a variety of areas. One is by an employer program. And the employer program, absolutely what you want to do is create the documentation. And you might start with that brag sheet. And the brag sheet is the docking and logging in their experience level, and potentially by testing then you're verifying or confirming knowledge level. So periodic training and testing, and then LMS system, learning management system, by e-learning and by tracking training activities. That employer-based program, certainly it's about documentation, but it's also about proving out. And proving out down here in the testing or by a small, short, hands-on exercise along with some written confirmation, written quizzes that help confirm knowledge. So it's all traceable, trackable on an LMS system. But if it's an employer-based program, it just can't be that Bill knows this and I know that he knows that. Well, you really actually need to start documenting that and trapping or capturing that. And that brag sheet is a great way to get there. Another way to do that is an independent third party. There's a number of organizations, ourselves and others do that. But you know, you have to appreciate, we come in and see these folks for a week at a time, or 3 days, or it might be 2 weeks. So we don't get to see their full capability in all cases. What they're doing generally is we're generally training. We can be doing audits, crane and rigging competency audits for operators, riggers, signal persons. We will certainly need to execute some written and some practical exams. And certainly that's scalable through the organization. So you can have an outside party do some of that for you. But my goodness, you really want to make sure that the folks that you're asking to help assist you with that will be providing the documentation and the backup as needed. We've got records. We actually have not ever thrown a record away. They're boxed. We have them go back to '86, but we want to make sure that we can retain those records. And we've received, every year we'll receive 5 or 6 calls that go back 5 and 10 and sometimes 15 years on somebody's program that they've attended and what kind of content was presented during that course. So knowing what the course content is, what testing was there, and what the qualification level was achieved out of that is very important, and that takes traceability. Another way, of course, is a certification, so that it could be done by prior training, or it could be that a person goes ahead and signs up and opts to take one of the national programs. And in current date, we've got 3 substantial programs out there: CIC, NCCER, and then NCCCO, help provide certification testing for folks that are involved in rigging and then in signaling. And that's our subject today. We obviously know that organizations, some of the similar organizations are these, also offer mobile cranes, some overhead cranes, some lift director, and so on. So, but our subject today really is rigging a signal person. And so there are national accreditation groups, accredited groups that can do the testing to confirm competency and ability. So what you can't really always confirm is the experience side, and that's why the brag sheet is there to help track that experience. It gets down to knowledge, experience, training, background. So let's start off with signal person responsibilities here. And knowing and understanding basic hand signals, these are requirements out of the 1400 document, and be competent in the signal methods. Now, and this will see downstream that they need to have documentation of the signal method that which they are qualified in, and it could be multiples. So it could be hand signals, could be radios, could be both. So we need to make sure that the documentation tracks really with what they've been tested against. Understand, so some of the responsibilities here are understanding their responsibilities so they become an active role player and a participant when requested by the operator. So if the operator can't see, or it's fuzzy, it's foggy, or lighting is not the best, the operator may simply request that signal person be used for that activity. Signal persons are not required in all crane and rigging activities. Just so you know, I mean, right up front, they're not required in all activities. However, OSHA has talked about, as requested by the operator, when you have a blind pick operation, you can't see over the side. When the traveling, when the crane is, and that we have an obstructed view. Also, when there are site-specific concerns, and then when we are, when a spotter is needed near energized lines, when we're working under the table A environment and addressing those issues, the spotter that's being used to help the operator and signal person must also be a qualified signal person, okay, and that is a requirement. All right, let's take a look then. Signal persons must understand equipment operation. So you'll notice even in this photo right here, a signaler is giving a boom down signal, and we are in a situation with a hydraulic crane. You'll get a lot of fishing pole effect, deflection. We need to understand the difference between when we need to maybe hoist the load off the ground or boom the load off the ground based on anticipated deflection. We don't want the load singing out here 3 or 4 feet, and it creates an additional radius for the crane, maybe right on the edge of his chart, and now we're over the chart. So the signaler needs to understand, how do I keep that load in its footprint or shadow when I'm just breaking it off the ground when I'm coming up, and then certainly managing it well when it's coming down. So he needs to understand about the crane and or the LHE, load handling equipment, the dynamics, effects of swinging. You know, sometimes we get to swinging too quickly, and we expect to be able to give the operator an immediate stop signal. We need to coast that load into place, give a very gentle anticipated swing, stop signal, and those are, we need to be able to start reading and understanding the operator and his idiosyncrasies, how quick or how slow does he get into or get out of a motion. So, and we can swing so fast, obviously, to take the load out of radius. So it can be an issue, and part of that is in the hands of the signaler. What are we instructing or what are we asking the operator to do? Obviously, stopping can add dynamics, and bouncing to the low, bouncing to the crane, side loading to the boom. So, and boom deflection, as we discussed. So the signal person must be either verbal or written tested on the subject of signaling as relates to not only the signals but equipment operation and the effects of signaling activities, but he also must be practical tested on the signals that he is being qualified for. So those things have to be in his core base, and then he gets tested on those. Signal types, of course, hand signals, voice signals, or commands, and audible, horns, bells, and whistles in some cases. So any of the qualification elements, if he's going to get on the radio, that voice signal needs to be on his card or on his certificate or documentation as provided. So any of the 3 or all of them need to be listed as applicable to the job site and to his qualification backgrounds. The signaler needs to be competent or capable to be able to provide unique signals whenever those are required on a job site. The signals need to fall into certain categories. One, they're not already established. So we can't give a finger, a single index finger circling up, which is our normal hoist signal, can't then also be used for some other crane instruction. So it needs to be a unique signal that's not confused with an existing signal. Unique signals such as there may be a live jib, raise or lower. So there may be, what we may be looking at, live a boom up or boom down signal. You actually needed a new signal or a different signal to manage the live jib, and then all parties must agree. Start with the signal person and operator, and then those other participants that are involved in the load handling activity, because the riggers or tagline persons need to understand those unique signals so that they can respond and react and not get in a bind. All right? Let's take a look then at on a signal system suitable for the site. These are requirements from OSHA. They need to be suitable for the site and working activity. Transmission maintain, operator to stop if the stop signal is given, and one signal person is really the key. You can't have two signals simultaneously unless it's a stop or emergency stop, and then all signals given from the operator's perspective. I noted to you a few webinars ago that we talked about the ability of a young man giving signals for a wind turbine nacelle installation. He was up inside the nacelle and getting ready to load the hub on, and radioed down to the operator, gave him a swing right signal voice command, and the operator swung to his right, and the signaler thought to his personal right. He ended up getting crushed and died as a result. It's got to be from the operator's perspective, from sitting in the seat, operator's right, operator's left. So we need to remember that and make sure that our signalers are schooled up and dialed up to think that way as they give those commands for operations to go forward. Multiple signals identify the crane giving the signal. Often it may be by first name of the operator, Bill or George. Could be Grove this, link belt that. And so we need to identify if we're going to flag two cranes at one time. If we're either by hand giving the appropriate signal, left hand to the, in this case, the boom truck, right hand to the mobile crane, or vice versa, or by voice command, voice identification. We've got to identify which crane we're asking to perform which function. Electronic signals tested before operation. Certainly as a dedicated channel is called out by OSHA, and systems may be shared during multiple crane operations if using dedicated channel. We got to watch out for adjacent to railroads, coordinated with trains, which is just means also that we may get radio walkover, also that we have activities going on in radio frequency interference, and then the operator that may have a headset on, he needs to be able to communicate hands-free. So whatever system we choose for the operator, if it's an electronic system, he's got to be able to voice command, voice capable, and be able to pass that information, feedback back to the signaler at will without using his hands. Then signal process, of course, is the process and system is agreed to by all parties. This is the old function, direction, distance or speed, function, and stop. And if you'll notice, I just gave an example here. Load's hoisted up. We give a swing right, that's the operator's right. And we start counting off and saying 180 degrees, 120, 90, 45, 20, swing, stop. And you're talking like you want the operator to react using the crane in a slow, continuous motion, continuous verbal exchange. The idea is that if we break communication, he needs to simply stop the crane, reestablish communication, and then reinitiate. So this is a bit, there are some sites that choose and wish to really avoid a continuous communication, but that really isn't what OSHA is talking about. I mean, that's their call out is continuous exchange from the signaler to the operator unless a stop is required. All right, so let's take a look then. Single language and placards effectively communicate in the language used, and the signals need to be posted on the machine or in the vicinity nearby the hoisting operation. All right, so let's take a look then. Operations, if we have an operation that has a dedicated spotter, if used for power line operations, it must be a qualified signal person. That is a requirement by OSHA. Signal person recommended for man baskets, and it's our opinion that you really should use a qualified signal person, and our preference would be, this is an opinion thing, we prefer that the signal person in the basket be a qualified signal person, the rigger or the maintenance person. If not, they should be on the ground observing and helping, being a second set of eyes as needed. So it's a very strong advice that we have that signal person, that qualified person, up in the basket in case we get into a bite, get in a bind, and we need to react somehow, that he knows the signals to give, and or verbally and or by hand signal, he can get that basket out of a problem if necessary. Drill shaft operations, according to OSHA, the signal person shall be posted near that operation, near the ground, near the shaft. And then lifting personnel for pile driving operations, a spotter shall be used. And the spotter, in this case, when you go back and look at the definition and or the application, that spotter then is a qualified signal person. All right, so let's take a look. The exceptions to this, let's take a look then at, in the 2,000-pound category or less, so that's a small boom or a mechanic's truck. This is where it falls off a bit. No qualified rigger for fall zone. It just needs to be trained for rigging. The rigging application suitable for the machine is operating. No qualified signal person just needs to be trained, and no certified crane operator simply needs to be trained. So that really falls to the employer's feet as to what the folks need to be competent and capable of. So it's trained in all cases, trained in rigging, trained in signaling, trained in operation of the crane as necessary, as needed. And we need to make sure that this is for the 2,000-pound capacity or less. There is a special section in OSHA that gets into this category, and if you read it very closely, you'll find these things to be true. Let's take a look then. Let me open this back up just for a second and make sure that we have into our, I'm going to have one of our assistants here. I want to go back to a rigging, the rigging operations section. This is a little bit of a new format for us, and let's float back in and see that we've got everything covered for riggers. Let's go back into the left there. Okay. Right there is fine. Okay, so thanks for the help. Just a little technical information there and assistance. What we want to make sure that we do is for the riggers is to ensure that we have on the rigger side, as we talked about, the categories for qualification for basic rigger really is this non-math world, and then the lift direct or the advanced rigger really gets into a discussion point about calculations and their qualification. The definition for that qualified person is by being able to have performed using their knowledge, experience, and training, and that's really the issue when we get into on the rigger side, which is really kind of a black hole for OSHA. I just wanted to make sure that if you really kind of denote this, and I'm going to switch over to a new format, and to make sure I can kind of highlight this for us is and what we've started to see is rigger level 1 and or basic rigger, as termed by a number of organizations in our industry, and then a rigger level 2, or what we call an advanced rigger. And those categories really start to help highlight to us is sling inspection or rigging inspection overall, and we'll just call it all rigging, and then types of slings, pitch capacities, and methodology. So there's really no calculation, and that's sort of the down and dirty for this. On the rigger level 2 side, on the advanced rigger over here, and this is ITI. I'm just going to break this out to you. These are what we're seeing happening in the marketplace. Folks are asking us for consultation. How do we get from point A to point B and make sure? Because if we stay as a qualified rigger, that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And if OSHA walks up and you've got one qualified rigger on the job site, they would probably be expecting that person to be competent in load weight estimation, in identifying center of gravity, in distribution of weight based on tear load or net load, share of load to each rigging component or sling. Then to be able to calculate sling tension. I mean, all of a sudden, if the person that you said is our designated or qualified rigger is not competent or capable to do these things, and these things are being performed, the work's being performed under the hook, but the knowledge isn't there to back it up, we're probably getting a bite, probably getting a bind there. So what you want to do is evaluate your program and then identify, gee, in the qualification process for our riggers, our basic rigger or advanced rigger, do we have these things covered? And that's really by subject, and it can be surfaced by experience, interviews, but also by testing and by performance. So at the end of the day, qualified rigger for OSHA means a qualified person, and qualified person means you can perform the work. And if some of that work is over here on the right side and we don't have them trained up or prepared, we might really be falling short of the intended position that OSHA wishes us to be in. And I'll take us, at the end of the day, part of this is OSHA is stating to us, and the fact that we've been duly warned, OSHA expects competency, and the employer needs to ensure their employees have knowledge, experience, and training for their tasks, whether they are a basic rigger, advanced rigger, or signal person and or lift director. So we've really kind of been put on notice by OSHA creating the document they have. Great document. It helps us in the workplace, and it gets us to the end goal. But we want to make sure that we're meeting those expectations of competency with knowledge, experience, and training. All right. So let's take a look and see if we have questions. And Jonah, let's see if you're able to, if we have any questions, I'd sure like to entertain those and see what we have for the listeners and for some of the folks. And doesn't look like we have any today, and we've been able to answer a lot of those hopefully along the way for you. And we're looking forward to a whole host of 2014 programs. I think that you're going to end up with a fantastic offering coming up in the near future. I think we have a plethora. I'm going to kind of get the screen going. You know, we had a ground bearing pressure presentation not long ago, and we're going to have some additional down in the dirt, sorry for the pun, but down in the dirt type evaluation for ground bearing pressure or allowables, and we have a whole host of additional subjects that will be covered. We're going to offer some additional master rigger, sort of some quick subjects. We'll have mobile crane webinars coming up, and additional somewhat we call advanced rigging webinars coming up on the 2014 schedule. We're still planning on one a month, and we're looking for additional presenters besides ITI. We normally do 2/3 ITI and 1/3 special presenters. There's a question that came up just a minute ago. Are sling angle stress calculation considered advanced rigging? And it's a great question, and one thing I'll just go back and re-infer to everybody that's attended today. If you really want to categorize, this is ITI, this is me, I guess you want to say that. I'm going to put this no calcs on this side for a basic rigger, and calculations are over on the advanced rigger side. So we just have to appreciate the idea that, yes, there are calculations over here. If somebody is required to do calculations to perform rigging activities, and they're really termed a basic rigger, we got a square block and a round hole. We don't have the right person. So the answer is yes. To do stress calculations on slings, that would generally be in the advanced rigging. I can tell you CIC and CCO all have basic rigor or level 1 testing and the level 2 testing. And in those testing packages, if you look at the requirements for the candidates, they give you basically that same layout that, yes, calculations are on the advanced rigor exams, and you'll be expected to know those. And there are prep courses, of course, to be able to prepare for those, but calculations show up on the advanced side, not on the basic rigging side. Great question. That was from Andrew. We really appreciate it. There's a question that talks about no certified crane operator for loads 2,000 pounds or less, or for cranes that cannot lift over 2,000. They have riggers who did not know the weight of the item they were lifting. Well, let me give you a classification. I'm going to give you what that qualification calls out for is cranes that are rated at 2,000 pounds or less. So that would really be a 1-ton mechanics truck or on a panel truck. And it's about the crane and its rating. It's not about the load weight. It's about the crane itself. And when we've got a crane mechanics truck, a panel truck that we run around the countryside providing service for folks that have, they might do machine repair and equipment repair and so on, or light duty pump lifting, might be a dual axle back here. But it's simply got a small mechanics boom, auto crane type boom on the back end, and that's the type of unit we're really talking about. It's a small unit that is designed to augment or supplement versus heavy lifting for a man or person, or for 2 or 3 is to put a small auto crane on the back. The auto crane is simply a trade name for one of the crane types that we're talking about, but it's definitely 2,000. When it's in that 2,000 pound or less category, that's what we're talking about. And when those conditions arise or apparent, then you don't have to have a qualified a rigger. You don't have to have a qualified signal person. You don't have to have a certified crane operator. However, OSHA says they must be trained to perform their work, and that is a requirement, that they're competent to perform the work task assigned to them with the machinery and equipment in your fleet and in the task section. So it really is about the crane's lifting capability, and it's all about 2,000 pounds or less for that particular unit right there. Great question. Thank you very much. We're looking forward to having a super 2014. We really appreciate you participating with us in 2013. We've had a blast with a lot of great presenters, and I've had a lot of fun. We had accident investigation, critical lift planning, all kinds of subjects this year. I'm looking forward to more bigger and better next year. So hope everybody has a great holiday season. Don't forget, we have resources available online through ITI, and take a look if you would like to get involved and take a look at the bookstore. Just go to iti.com and go to the bookstore and take a look. Super resources. We have over 400 items there that might be of some assistance in your library or help you get some of the work done and tasks done that you're looking forward to. Hope everybody has a great holiday season. Merry Christmas to everybody, and we look forward to visiting with you again in 2014. This is Mike, and we're signing off, and have a great day.